Have you ever sat in a room full of people, family, maybe even your own children, and felt like you'd somehow vanished? Not in the dramatic way, where someone yells or slams a door. No, it's quieter than that. Like when you speak and no one looks up, or when they talk about plans and forget to include you, or when your opinion is asked, but dismiss the moment you give it. You nod, you smile, you tell yourself you're just being sensitive, but deep down, it stings. I've been there. I think many of us have, somewhere along the road, after the years of caregiving, of showing up, of being the strong one. We find ourselves feeling small, not because we've become smaller, but because the world around us has stopped looking closely. And maybe the hardest part is this. We don't want to beg for respect. We don't want to force it. We just want to feel seen, heard, acknowledged. That's what brought me here, to this quiet moment of reflection. I was having dinner with my daughter and her family a few months ago. We were all seated around the table, laughter echoing through the kitchen, plates clinking. At one point, I tried to offer a story, something from years ago that I thought would fit the moment. But before I could finish the first sentence, someone changed the subject, and just like that, I disappeared again. Later that night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, and I looked at my own face not with anger, but with a kind of quiet sorrow. When did my voice start blending into the background? That question haunted me not because I wanted to reclaim attention, but because I wanted to reclaim dignity. And that's when I began to notice something. Respect doesn't begin with how others treat us. It begins with the way we carry ourselves when no one's watching. There's an energy you give off when you respect yourself. It's subtle. It's not about power or pride. It's about presence. You walk into a room differently. You speak with a quieter confidence. You make eye contact a little longer, and even without a single word. People notice. That's what happened when I started dressing in colors that made me feel alive again. I know that might sound small, but there was a time I wore only what was practical, muted, sensible things. One day, I found an old mustard yellow cardigan tucked in the back of my closet. I hadn't worn it in years. It made my skin glow. It made me feel like me, so I wore it to the grocery store. Of all places, and the cashier, barely 20, I'd guess, looked up and said, "That color looks beautiful on you." She wasn't trying to flatter me. She wasn't trained to say that. She saw me, and in that moment, I realized I had started seeing myself again first. That's where the first real change began, not in arguments, not in demanding more, but in simply showing up differently, with intention. One day, I stood straighter, not to appear taller, but to feel my own spine again, to remember that I belong here, in this world, in this conversation, at this table. Frank, my neighbor, taught me that long before I understood it. He's 82 now, always well-groomed, always quiet. But there's something about him people pause when he enters a room, not out of obligation, but out of respect. He doesn't say much, but when he does, you listen. I asked him once, "How do you carry that kind of presence?" He smiled, almost like he didn't even notice it. And then he said, "I don't chase attention. I carry peace." Most people are so noisy. They forget how powerful stillness is. That stayed with me. Because maybe the most powerful shift we can make is to stop over-explaining, stop apologizing for having needs, stop filling silence with chatter because we're afraid of being overlooked. Instead, we learn to sit, to breathe, to meet someone's gaze not with demand, but with calm certainty. That's what I began practicing when my adult children came to visit. I stopped jumping up to refill glasses the second they were empty. I stayed seated, engaged, present, not because I wanted to be cold, but because I didn't want to be invisible anymore. And you know what happened? They started noticing, not in grand ways, but they looked up more. They asked if I wanted anything. They waited for my answer, as if, suddenly, I was part of the room again, not the hostess, not the helper, just me. And it felt good. That's the quiet power of subtle respect. You don't have to say a word. You just have to begin honoring yourself again in the way you sit, dress, look, listen, and breathe. I remember watching my granddaughter Sophie paint in the garden one morning. She was so focused, so still, barely a word spoken. But in that silence, there was strength. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply lost in something that mattered to her, and we all stayed quiet, watching, not because she asked us to, but because her presence invited respect. We can do that. 2, we can become that kind of quiet center in our homes, in our families, not by controlling, not by demanding, but by embodying something deeper, an inner steadiness. And when you carry that steadiness, you don't need to remind people of your value. They feel it. I think one of the hardest truths I've had to face as I got older is this. For so long, I taught people how to treat me by the way I treated myself. That's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? When I look back, I see it so clearly now. All the times I said yes when I meant maybe. All the times I pushed aside my own exhaustion because someone needed something. All the times I smiled and nodded even when I was hurting because I thought that's what love was. I thought that's what respect looked like, being accommodating, agreeable, never a problem. But what I didn't realize was, over time, that kind of self-sacrifice starts to look like silence. And silence, eventually, gets mistaken for permission. It happened to my friend Helen. 2, she's 75, fiercely loving, and has the kind of warmth that makes her home feel like a sanctuary. But over the years, her grown children started treating her house like a convenience store. Drop-offs, last-minute visits, requests, favors, all met with her quiet. Of course, honey, until one weekend. When she was recovering from the flu, her son dropped off his dog without even asking, just rang the bell, handed her the leash, and said, "Thanks, Mom, you're the best." Before running back to his car, she stood there, feverish, tired, holding the leash in one hand and her coffee in the other. And that's when it hit her. They weren't being cruel. They were just following the rules she never changed. And that's how it happens, isn't it? We think we're being generous, kind, supportive. But when kindness comes without boundaries, people stop seeing it as a gift and start seeing it as default. So Helen did something she'd never done before. She called her son the next day and said, gently but clearly, "I'm not feeling well enough to take care of the dog. You'll need to make other arrangements next time. Please ask first." Her voice shook, not from anger, from the weight of reclaiming space she had long abandoned. And to her surprise, her son didn't get defensive. He paused, then said, "You're right. Mom, I didn't even think." He didn't think. That's the part that stung. But it was also the beginning of something new. Because sometimes the people we love won't respect our boundaries until we have boundaries. That's what I started noticing. 2, there was a time I used to fill every silence in conversation. It made me anxious, somehow, to leave space unspoken. Like if I didn't keep things moving, they'd forget I was still there. I'd over-explain my decisions, even small ones. I'd apologize for resting, for declining invitations, for taking up time. But silence, I've learned, isn't something to fear. It's something to own. When you sit in silence, not as avoidance, but as presence, you teach others that your energy isn't desperate, that you're comfortable in your own company, that you don't need to prove anything. My grandson Ryan came over one afternoon. We were having tea on the porch. He started venting about school, exams, and his girlfriend all in a rush. I just listened. I didn't jump in with advice. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't nod too much or interrupt with a story of my own. I just stayed still. When he finally ran out of steam, he looked at me and said, "You're really easy to talk to." That surprised me. I hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. But that's the thing. Real presence speaks louder than performance. People feel it. Especially young people, they know when you're genuinely with them, not waiting for your turn to be heard. That kind of listening is powerful. It earns respect not because you've demanded it, but because you've offered something rare, space. And I started offering that to myself. 2, I began paying attention to how I spoke about myself. Because words are not just sound. They shape how others see you and how you see yourself. I stopped saying things like, "Oh, I'm too old for that," or "I probably won't remember anyway," or "I'm just being silly." I started catching those little ways I was shrinking, laughing myself off, brushing myself aside. Instead, I started speaking with calm authority. "I'll think about it and let you know. That's not the best time for me. But thank you for asking. I'm not available then." No drama, no excuses, just clarity. It felt strange at first, almost too assertive. But over time, it felt like breathing, natural, freeing. And slowly, I noticed how people responded. Fewer assumptions, more invitations, more curiosity about what I wanted. Not because I pushed for it, but because I stopped erasing myself from the equation. You see, respect isn't always about what you say. Often, it's about what you don't say. You don't say yes when you mean no. You don't over-explain your value. You don't fill space to be liked. You don't carry everyone else's comfort at the cost of your own peace. You stand softly, steadily as yourself. And from that place, respect grows. It's like a tree. You don't tug at it to make it grow faster. You just keep nourishing the roots. And eventually, people start coming to sit in your shade. That's what I've learned about presence. It's not showy. It doesn't need applause, but it changes everything around it. There's a shift that happens when you stop trying to be understood and start simply being. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a dramatic confrontation or a tearful declaration. It's quieter than that, like the slow, steady return of your own voice after years of speaking softly for the sake of others. And when it happens, you don't need to say much. People just start responding to you differently, not because you've taught them a lesson, but because they can feel that something inside you has come home. I remember the first time I truly noticed it in my own life. It wasn't anything grand. Just a Sunday afternoon, sitting across from my daughter at the kitchen table. She was talking about a difficult decision at work. And instead of offering solutions or rushing to comfort her like I always had, I just listened. I didn't nod excessively. I didn't say, "Here's what I would do." I didn't try to fill the space with motherly concern. I let the silence stretch out a little longer than felt comfortable. And then I simply said, "I trust you'll make the right choice." And in that moment, she looked at me not as the mom who always fixed things, not as the woman who folded herself into every need, but as a calm, rooted presence. Her shoulders dropped. She smiled, softly. "Thanks, Mom," she said. I think I needed to hear that more than anything else. What changed wasn't her, it was me. Because I had stopped needing to prove my worth through usefulness. I had stopped overextending in hopes of being needed. I had learned to sit with my own enoughness, and somehow that gave her permission to find hers. Too, that's the beautiful paradox, isn't it? When you stop chasing respect, it begins to find its way back to you. Frank, who I've mentioned before, still sharp, still riding his bicycle at nearly 83, told me something one afternoon while we were sitting on a bench watching kids play at the park. "You know what makes people pay attention?" he asked. "Not noise, not need. It's certainty, quiet certainty. Like when you walk into a room and your presence says, 'I belong here.' Even if no one else says it out loud, that stuck with me because for so long, I thought presence was about posture or tone or having the right words. But it's not. It's about the energy you carry when you no longer need validation to feel whole. And that's when things began shifting in the smallest, most beautiful ways. My grandchildren began lingering after visits, not always saying much, but staying a little longer. My son, who's often distracted, began to pause when I spoke, really pause, as if my words had weight again. I didn't change them. I changed how I showed up. I stopped apologizing for my opinions. If I had something to say, I said it clearly and calmly, no long preamble, no shrinking. I didn't ask for agreement. I didn't expect praise. I simply trusted my voice was worthy of the space it took up. And people noticed, not right away. But over time, you see, people respond to how you treat yourself. If you treat yourself like an afterthought, they will too. But when you begin to live with quiet dignity, when you create space in your life for your own interests, your own well-being, your own silence that becomes contagious. My friend Grace, who recently started gardening again after years of doing nothing but care for others, told me something I'll never forget. She said, "It's funny. I used to wait for my family to come visit to feel alive. Now, I find joy in my tomatoes and somehow they call more often. There's something magnetic about joy, especially when it's rooted in stillness, not performance." And that's another truth I've come to know deeply. Independence doesn't mean isolation. It means you've built a life that doesn't collapse when others don't show up exactly the way you hoped they would. When you reclaim that kind of quiet power, it shifts the entire dynamic. People no longer see you as someone who needs managing or appeasing. They see you as someone who holds their own center. And from that center, you begin making different choices. You stop offering more than you can give. You stop volunteering your time, energy, or resources out of guilt. You start saying things like, "Let me think about that." Instead of rushing into yes, you start asking yourself, "Is this honoring me too?" That's not selfishness. That's sacred balance. And when people see that you respect your own limits, they start respecting them too. Not because you forced them to, but because you quietly modeled it. You become, in a way, a mirror. You reflect back to others the dignity that exists when a person knows their value. You teach without teaching that respect isn't something you request. It's something you live, and that kind of living, it heals. It repairs old patterns without needing to name them. It softens tension without needing to confront it. It calls others toward a higher standard, not because you scolded them, but because your presence invites it. So no, you don't have to be loud. You don't have to beg. You don't have to keep giving until you disappear. You only need to remember who you are. Not who you were in your 30s or 50s, but who you are now, wiser, gentler, fuller. Because the woman or man who knows their own worth without needing to prove it is someone people respect, quietly, naturally, without even realizing they're doing it. If you're still here with me, quietly listening, thank you. I don't take that lightly. I know how precious your time is, especially now when every moment seems to hold more weight, more reflection, more meaning than it used to. And if something I said reached a place in you, a memory, a sigh, a truth that had gone quiet, I want you to know. I'm grateful, because in a world that moves too fast, it's a gift to pause, to listen, to feel together. You see, this conversation wasn't about changing other people. It was never about tips or tricks or clever strategies to make anyone treat you differently. It was about something much deeper, something we often forget when we've spent a lifetime caring for everyone else first. It was about coming home to yourself. It was about standing taller, not to appear proud, but to remember your own strength. About saying less, but meaning more. About letting go of the need to explain or perform, and choosing instead to simply be. That kind of presence doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it settles like sunlight through the window, quiet, steady, unmistakable. And when people feel it, they begin to respond, not because they're told to, but because something about it calls forth their better nature. Maybe that's the true gift of this stage of life, not just the wisdom we've earned, but the ability to live it with grace, not to prove ourselves anymore, but to embody the truths we've carried all along. So if you're sitting there wondering, will they ever see me again? Let me say this as gently and clearly as I can. You were never invisible. You were never forgotten. You only got quiet for a while because the world told you that's what goodness looked like. But your voice still matters. Your presence still matters. You matter. You don't have to explain your worth. You don't have to earn space at the table. You are the table. So let this be the beginning of something not loud, not dramatic, but steady. A beginning where you take 5 minutes each morning just to check in with yourself. A beginning where you wear the scarf, or the shoes, or the color that makes you feel alive. A beginning where you say no with softness, and yes with joy, and I don't know, with peace. A beginning where you become the calm in the room, not the noise. And if you feel like sharing, I would love to hear from you. Has your relationship with your children or family changed over the years? Did something in today's conversation speak to an experience you've had? What quiet shift has helped you reclaim your voice? or your space? Leave a comment below. If your heart leads you to, this isn't just a video, it's a place to be heard, a place to feel less alone. And if this message made you feel seen, if it reminded you of who you are beneath the roles, the routines, and the years, I'd be honored if you'd stay connected. Click the subscribe button not out of obligation, but so we can keep meeting here, not just as speaker and listener, but as fellow travelers, as people who still believe in the quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that knows. Thank you for being here, for sharing your time, your heart, your stillness. Take care of yourself today, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. You deserve that. You always have. And if no one's told you this lately, let me be the one to say it. I see you, I respect you, and I'm so glad you're here.